My name is Landon Simpson, and welcome to Inside the Silver Screen, an insight into all things cinema. On this week's episode, we'll break down and practice the visual components of Wes Anderson's unique artistic style. Then we'll take those same visual components and analyze how they show up in the opening shot of Scorsese's Raging Bull. Lastly, we'll look ahead to the upcoming movies that are slated to release in 2021. Let's get into it. Wes Anderson grew up in Houston, Texas, and attended the University of Texas, Austin, where he majored in philosophy. In 1994, he screened his short film Bottle Rocket at the Sundance Film Festival. The screenplay was co-written by Owen Wilson and starred both Owen and his brother Luke Wilson. The film caught the attention of producer Paulie Platt and led to Anderson's feature-length debut film of the same name, kickstarting his career. He would go on to make 9 more films, with his 10th, The French Dispatch, set to come out this year. Some of his more popular works include The Grand Budapest Hotel, Fantastic Mr. Fox, and The Royal Tenenbaums. Anderson has a very particular style when it comes to visuals and storytelling. He is honest and forward with his stories and not afraid of shifts in tone that can even ironically contrast the playful visuals. He loves symmetry, quirky characters, warm and bright colors, and unique wardrobes. He brings his personality into the story through his style. Anderson is a director whose style is identifiable from a mile away. In this segment, we will discuss how he uses visual elements in a unique manner in order to develop his own personal style. Let's look at how a Wes Anderson movie looks like a Wes Anderson movie. In the book Filmmaking in Action, Adam Leipzig and Barry Weiss write that set design is comprised of 3 primary questions. 1. How do I use the space available to me? 2. How do I design sets for that space? And 3. How do I arrange elements on that set to achieve my creative goal? We will be focusing on how Wes Anderson answers this last question by using the set design elements of color and decoration to maximize his creative success. We'll start with color. Color is used to enhance different moods and emotions in a story. According to color theory, certain colors are directly related with certain feelings. For example, blue tends to align with sadness, while red is related with anger. Lighting directly influences how color is captured in the camera. More intense lighting will lead to brighter colors and apply a happy tone. Vice versa, dull lighting creates faded colors and leads to a dark tone. Anderson is one of the most consistent directors in his use of color. Wes uses high saturation with vibrant colors and high brightness. These bright tones are all the result of lighting, settings, and costumes working together in his set designs. However, while he has completely nailed his style of color use, he is notorious for regularly opposing color theory. Mentioned earlier, color theory suggests that certain feelings are evoked by certain tones of colors. While Anderson does at times use color theory, like in this scene from The Royal Tenenbaums, as a whole, his stories are often dark and sad, set in worlds full of bright and vibrant colors and sets. Let's look at a scene from The Darjeeling Limited where 3 brothers are trying to connect on top of a mountain after falling on some hard times.
Why didn't you tell us sooner?
Because I'm trying to protect you from all the painful emotions this is probably going to stir up.
Well, aren't you kind of doing that right now?
Yeah, I'm scared too.
Notice how Anderson uses high saturation and bright yellows regardless of the brothers being lost in their lives. Every character is wearing bright-hued clothing and the lighting from the sun is very intense. This directly opposes color theory, which suggests that sad scenes should be associated with colors like blue and gray. For this week's episode, we decided to try to practice some of the things that we have been teaching with Wes Anderson's visuals. We start by trying to find a setting that has good color and lighting. I chose to use my back door area because it had just snowed and I wanted the color of the white. There's also some good color in the fence and in the plants. I also decided to wear a blue shirt to try to introduce a little bit more bright colors. We'll pick this shot back up after our next section. Now let's look at set decoration. Set decoration is how a director chooses to arrange physical objects around their sets. It is often used to clue the audience in on the time and place of the scene as well as to define characters. It may also be used to enhance the story world and make the world feel lived in. But this does not mean that set decoration has to be limited by reality. Most directors creatively decorate their sets in ways that complement their specific style. Some directors prefer minimalistic or realistic decorations on their sets. Wes Anderson is not one of those directors. Many people have said that Wes Anderson's movies take place in a storybook world due to the dollhouse presentation of his sets. Although the decorations may not be completely realistic, they all align with his creative vision. He often uses the decorations in his sets to define individual characters. For an example, let's look at the introduction of the 3 Tenenbaum children in The Royal Tenenbaums.
Chaz Tenenbaum had, since elementary school, taken most of his meals in his room, standing up at his desk with a cup of coffee to save time.
Throughout this sequence, the set decorations tell the story and personality of the characters without even needing the narration. Each room seems like a room in a dollhouse, and every shot is crowned with decoration and detail. Each object in the frame has a function to characterize all three Tenenbaum children, as well as define the overall style of the film. Turning to our in-practice segment, I decided to make the set a little bit more decorated by moving some plants into the frame as well as taking the cover off the couch. We also moved the table in order to create more symmetry. Once again, we'll pick this up after our next section. We'll now look at every director's most vital visual component, shot composition. Shot composition is how a scene is arranged within the frame of the camera. This includes everything from the placement of characters to the movement of the camera within the scene. Similar to a still photograph, a shot, whether stationary or moving, should guide the viewer's eye. The goal of shot composition is to focus the audience on certain parts of the frame. Working with his cinematographer Robert Yeoman, Wes Anderson has produced numerous beautiful shots. To look at the first aspect of shot composition, let's analyze framing in space. One of the main ways in which Anderson and Yeoman produce unique compositions is through their use of framing and how they space their scenes. There are many common practices within framing that can be manipulated to create an array of shots. One of the most common things you'll hear is the rule of thirds, where the frame is effectively split in thirds up and down and side to side. Oftentimes, the subject of a shot will be placed in the upper corners of the center rectangle, as this is a natural place for the viewer's eyes to go. Other important elements include symmetry, guiding lines, depth, and space. Anderson likes to shoot straight onto characters and use space to create depth rather than using angles. For example, this shot from Fantastic Mr. Fox creates depth by having the wall in the foreground, Mrs. Fox slightly behind, then the hills in the background. Notice how Mrs. Fox is directly in the center. She is framed in a box between the walls, the line near her knees, and the horizon line above her. Everything in this shot leads you directly to her while also providing a sense of vastness in the space provided. The shot holds symmetry from left to right, with the walls creating guiding lines. So after having our color and lighting as well as our set decoration completely set up, we decided to compose our shot. We decided to place myself as the subject in the middle of the frame like Wes Anderson would. Notice the symmetry on the top of the fence, the back of the couch, and the table. Also notice the use of space as well as the plants that we used as set decorations on the side of the couch. Overall, this feels pretty similar to a Wes Anderson shot other than the colors being a little bit inconsistent. Once again, we'll incorporate some movement and motion after our next section. Now let's look at movements and motion in order to understand another component of shot composition. Wes Anderson uses camera movements and editing in conjunction with framing to produce various effects. Movement adds pace and action to a film, allowing the audience to engage in a different manner than still shots. Just as important, movement leads the viewer through the shot, which is particularly important to Wes Anderson's style of filmmaking. In this shot from Moonrise Kingdom, we are first given a super wide establishing shot, well framed of course. The space between Susie on the left and Sam on the right represents the final barrier to their reunion. The next couple shots bring us closer to them. Then, we see the final closing movements before they are united together to begin the rest of their journey. Anderson is not one to shy away from these wide spaces, so these type of lateral movements are quite common. To incorporate the use of motion in our shot, I decided to get up and see how the shot would be composed after the subject left the frame. As you can see, overall, it is still composed according to the rule of thirds, and it still looks visually compelling. I also decided to quickly test another shot with my dog. She starts in the middle of the screen and then slowly moves out of the frame while the camera remains still. On her way out of the scene, she passes through the upper left corner of the rule of thirds. That is all for our in-practice segment, and hopefully we demonstrated how you can use these concepts in your own work. Wes Anderson may not be everyone's favorite director, but he brings a unique look to the silver screen that is unmatched by anyone else. His specificity in set design provides an impeccable look that is brought to life through his shot composition. His stories are quirky, dramatic, funny, and touching. Despite the warm colors, the characters face deep struggles of identity and perseverance. Anderson's films capture an honest yet whimsical look at the world where his personality shines through. Martin Scorsese directed 1980's Raging Bull without compromise, thinking it would be his last movie ever due to the failure of his previous film, New York, New York. The movie is based on the true story of Jake LaMotta, a boxer whose destructive personality is a threat to all of his personal relationships. Scorsese's vision ultimately paid off when the film was nominated for 8 Oscars. Although the picture is near perfect start to finish, today we will look at the opening credit sequence to analyze how Scorsese uses some of the set design and shot composition techniques mentioned in the previous segment to immediately set the tone for Raging Bull. Let's take a look at the clip. We'll first look at color and lighting. The film is shot entirely in black and white. In his masterclass, Scorsese explains that he ultimately decided to choose to shoot Raging Bull in black and white for a few reasons. 1, he did not like the bright red of the boxing gloves and fake blood in the ring. 2, he felt that black and white fit well for a period piece. And 3, he did not want the color to fade on his film strips, and that had become rather common in the late 1970s. Notice that the lighting comes from behind LaMotta, as well as the flashes from the cameras that add subtle touches of light throughout the entire scene. Overall, the colors are very dark, which fits well for a dark story. Let's analyze the minimal set decoration. Notice that LaMotta is alone in the ring. There are no trainers in the corner and there's no opponent. Again, this is an intentional and metaphorical choice. It serves to show that LaMotta is at home in the ring, and he's also isolated in the ring. The fact that there is no one else in the ring also provides room for the credits. Notice that the people watching and taking photos in the background are fully visible. They are also taking photos, which not only serves to add to the literal flashiness of the scene, but it also shows that LaMotta is a person in the spotlight. The costuming is pretty standard as it's just regular boxing gear, but the black and white makes LaMotta look like a wraith in the ring. The front ropes, the back ropes, the side ropes, and the ring lighting are all visible, which creates a near symmetrical shot. Other than the placement of LaMotta and the credits, the shot is entirely symmetrical. Let's look at shot composition. This is a wide shot, and you can see all of his surroundings. The ropes serve as metaphorical bars for LaMotta because he is trapped inside the ring. The bars also work well with the rule of thirds that we mentioned earlier. The ropes naturally guide the viewer's eye towards LaMotta, as well as towards the credits. The credits also fit perfectly within the gaps in the ropes. The front ropes are visible as well as the back ropes, and LaMotta is in the middle of them. LaMotta is 100% the focal point of this scene. The entire shot is designed around him. And when we look at movement in this scene, it all comes down to LaMotta's shadow boxing. How he moves in the ring shows how comfortable he is. The movement is also consistent with the framing and the rule of thirds, so that when LaMotta moves, the ropes are still leading our eyes towards LaMotta. One of my favorite parts about this movie is that right when the scene starts, his feet jump from the bottom rope. Now obviously the bottom rope is actually in front of LaMotta, but because of the way Scorsese engineers this scene, it looks like his feet are aligned on the bottom rope. The color and lighting, set decoration, framing, and movement are all essential things to think about when setting up every single shot. Great directors, like Scorsese, are using every inch of the screen to tell a story. In this scene specifically, Scorsese aligns every single visual component in order to serve the same purpose, to introduce the movie both thematically and stylistically. With so much going on in the world, it's always good to have something to look forward to. So we'll be looking at 10 movies that are slated to release in 2021 that we're all looking forward to here at Inside the Silver Screen. We start with Nomadland, directed by Chloe Zhao. It stars Frances McDormand as a middle-aged woman who packs her van and sets off across the American West to live as a modern-day nomad. It is streaming on Hulu the same day it opens in theaters. That day just happens to be tomorrow, Friday, February 19th. So if you have Hulu, it would be a great weekend watch. Our next movie is Top Gun: Maverick, directed by Joseph Kosinski. It stars Tom Cruise returning to his role, as well as Jennifer Connelly and Miles Teller. Maverick continues to push the envelope as an aviator in the sequel to the 1986 classic. After many delays in its release due to the pandemic, it is expected to release July 2nd. Paramount is trying to get a wide theatrical release for the movie. Then we have The Green Knight, directed by David Lowery. It stars Dev Patel and Alicia Vikander. It is a retelling of the epic medieval story of Sir Gawain and the Green Knight. King Arthur's nephew embarks on a quest to defeat the mysterious Green Knight. It is expected to release in theaters on July 31st. We also have Deepwater, directed by Adrian Lyne. It stars Ben Affleck and Ana de Armas. Based on the novel by Patricia Highsmith, Ben Affleck plays his seemingly familiar role of a husband suspected of the murder of his wife's lovers. The movie is shooting for an August 13th theatrical release. A Quiet Place Part 2 is set to be released on September 17th after having been delayed multiple times since last March. John Krasinski is resuming directorial duties, with Emily Blunt and Cillian Murphy starring. The movie is about the Abbott family when they find themselves hunted by the auditory monsters again. Also releasing on September 17th is Kenneth Branagh's directorial debut, Death on the Nile. It stars Armie Hammer and Gal Gadot, as well as Kenneth Branagh himself. It tells the story of a murder mystery on a steamboat set against the backdrop of the Egyptian deserts and the pyramids of Giza. We also have Dune, directed by Denis Villeneuve, with an all-star cast including Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Josh Brolin, Jason Momoa, Oscar Isaac, and Javier Bardem. The sci-fi adaptation of Frank Herbert's classic novel will come to theaters and HBO Max on October 1st. Last Night in Soho is directed by Edgar Wright and it stars Anya Taylor-Joy, who is famous for The Queen's Gambit, as well as Matt Smith. The Shaun of the Dead director returns with his film about a young fashion designer who is transported to the 1960s. It's expected to release in theaters on October 22nd. Don't Look Up is written and directed by Adam McKay. With one of the most star-studded casts in movie history, Don't Look Up is a comedy about two astronomers who must go on a media tour to warn mankind about an extinction-level comet heading towards Earth. It stars, get ready for it, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jennifer Lawrence, Chris Evans, Timothée Chalamet, Cate Blanchett, Meryl Streep, Jonah Hill, Matthew Perry, Tyler Perry, Kid Cudi, and Ariana Grande. This highly anticipated movie is headed straight to Netflix at some point in the second half of 2021. And to end this episode of Inside the Silver Screen exactly how we started it, we turn to Wes Anderson's latest film, The French Dispatch. It is yet another 2021 star-studded movie that includes Timothée Chalamet. It also stars Bill Murray, Owen Wilson, Saoirse Ronan, Frances McDormand, and Benicio del Toro. Taking place in a fictional French city, The French Dispatch brings to life 3 stories from an outpost of an American newspaper. The movie has been delayed continuously for the past year and is currently set to release at an unspecified date in 2021. Hopefully, theaters will be open across Oregon sometime in the near future so we can experience all of these films the way that they were meant to be seen. Until then, we'll have to make do with the streaming options that we have. However, we can also look forward to KBVR-TV content. Be sure to subscribe to the channel to not miss an episode of Inside the Silver Screen and to also check out other shows like Geeking Out About It and Locals Live. Our next episode will premiere on Thursday, March 4th. Until then, keep watching more movies.